Hi everyone, welcome. There's a special episode of our cricket podcast called Tvrdý koule, which means hard balls in English. Thank you, Steve. So, welcome my dear friend Steve O'Connor.
Hello everyone.
We have the great opportunity and privilege to welcome our dear friend. Our dear friend and a long-time friend and one of the, let's say,
founding fathers of Czech cricket,
James Drake. Hello, Jamesy.
Hello, everybody.
We've been discussing for a long time, maybe since the beginning of the show, this show, I can call it show, to make an episode about the history of Czech cricket. We haven't done it yet, so finally we found someone who was willing to discuss with us the early ages of Czech cricket and the crazy stories that happened when it all began. And so I'm really glad again that we have James here. Thank you, Jamesy, that you are joining us.
Pleasure.
I plan to be sort of something like a nurse in a retirement house today. I'm just gonna adjust your microphones and maybe turn down the volume when you say something completely unacceptable.
Okay.
But other than that, I'm really looking forward to hear your stories, which I probably have heard before, but nevertheless, I'm still looking forward to hear it again and maybe share it with our friends. Steve.
Yes. So welcome, James. It's a real pleasure to have you here because you're certainly one of the, to my mind, one of the key people when Czech cricket started up, and I was involved as well at the time, but I certainly wasn't as prominent in what was going on as you. But I also know that you've been here constantly all through the development of Czech cricket from its very genesis. So I think it'd be really interesting to just hear from you, first of all, about how you actually got involved in cricket over here, because my story is kind of by chance. It just happened that I went for a job interview at the British Embassy in 1996, and the guy who was interviewing me happened to be Tony Brennan, who happened to be mad about cricket and was keen to set up a cricket team. As soon as he discovered that I could play cricket, he offered me the job, which doesn't reflect very well on the recruitment processes of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. But
typical story of the 1990s.
Yes, but that's the way it went. So I was basically, I was forced to play because my boss told me to, although I did, of course, enjoy it. But in your case, James, you came to cricket, I guess, in a different way. I'd be interested to hear how you actually ended up playing the game here.
I can't remember. I was thinking about this on the tram coming here. There was an advert put out by Tony Brennan. Anyone who's interested in playing cricket, meet at the James Joyce pub in the Old Town, which is now no longer there. It was near the Clementinum, somewhere down there, around the corner. I think it was an ad in the Prague Post, but it might have been an ad stuck up in some bar. I don't know. But anyway, I went along, and I was pretty sceptical, actually, that to start cricket in a country like this, and there's no cricket pitch, because it's not like baseball. You're throwing the ball through the air. Yeah. In cricket, you're hitting it on the ground before it gets to the batsman. Yeah. So you need a proper safe surface to play. And so I went along, and we were sitting in this Irish bar, and he was putting forward his proposal, and I said, okay, let's see what happens, because I love cricket. Yeah. And also I was looking for a proper social life, because I was working with Americans, Czechs, and some of them I didn't, they were nice people, but sometimes we didn't have much to talk about. Our frames of reference are completely different, and I really missed cricket. So I thought, okay. So I went along with it, and our first game, and I can't even remember where our first game was. I think we played on Letna somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the grass surface.
Just on the grass, which was, and I can't remember if we played with
with proper ball and bats,
which would have been very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, again, 1990s, no.
But in those days, there was a thriving corporate community who would come together and put their hands in their pockets. As before any financial crisis, so they had lots of money. Yeah. They were quite happy to give money for a mention in the newspaper.
Were you involved in the Smíchov cricket sixes?
I was, and so were you. Yeah. You were there too. Yeah. And I remember that was a joyous time. I mean, it was a bit chaotic because there wasn't a proper. We were playing cricket on a rugby pitch, which is.
And it had some kind of coconut matting laid down or rolled out.
I can't even remember. But there were tents there and building development firms with their tents and their logos, and there was lots of money, and there was a tombola and a raffle and a compare, and we raised quite a lot of money to start Czech cricket.
I remember actually, I was really surprised at the time because I was press ganged into playing for the British Embassy in Smíchov, cricket sixes, and I think it was 1997 possibly. But the guy who was organising it, Ewan Edworthy, and Ewan might be listening, so all the best, Ewan. His girlfriend at the time was a lady called Lucia Výborná, who was like a famous personality, a media personality, and she was there. I thought, wow.
She dated a sumo player afterwards.
No, she married a sumo player.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
But in any case, she was the girlfriend of Ewan Edworthy. So there she was wandering around this obscure and chaotic cricket tournament, and I thought, wow, this must be quite something. So there I was. Yeah. So
she used to be on TV Nova, the breakfast show.
She now does Radio Journal, I think.
Yeah, she's still in the business.
Very nice lady.
So can I ask, when did it happen, and under what circumstances that you moved to Vipik in Prague 6? Do you have any? Do you remember that? I do. Sorry, the story I remember is that Tony Brennan had a meeting with then Prague 6 mayor Pavel Bém, again pretty famous name for the Czech listeners.
Later the mayor of Prague, Lord Mayor of Prague.
and various other stories. And he supposedly rented, can I say it in English? Rented the place to cricketers for £1 per year, so they could use the grass area in front of the Letohrádek Hvězda, the grass area, to play cricket. And that was from the retrospective, that was probably pretty crucial for the growth of Czech cricket.
Yeah, because prior to that we had nowhere to play. I mean, I just remember I was also involved in some bizarre negotiations because although it was from Prague 6, we also had to go through this obor veřejné zeleně, which was based at the magistrát, and I remember the name of the gentleman we had to deal with, Pan Sivin, who was an old guy.
Maybe he listens to.
I think he's dead by now. And because Tony's Czech wasn't that great, he brought me along to be his kind of negotiator. When we got there, this guy basically said, well, there's a big waiting list. It's a pretty non-standard request. I'm not really sure I can help you. It's going to take a long time. So I was like, okay, I was telling this to Tony. Yeah. And then the guy said, but you can speed up the process. There's a thing which they call the manipulační poplatek, which I love. I don't even know what you could call it in English, like a manipulation fee.
It's a code word
for a bribe. And he said, if you pay this, then if you pay 5,000 crowns, then we can speed it up, right? I was like, okay. And then we came out, and I remember Tony looking at me, and he said, like, did he just ask us for a bribe? I think so, yeah. So that was how it was then. In the end, we reported this to the mayor. I'm not sure if we went to Pavel Bém or to Jan Castle, who was the mayor at the time. Yeah. And anyway, then we were told, don't worry, it won't be a problem. But we still had to go to Pan Sivin and get it sorted out. So was
proper Czech 1990s experience.
Absolutely,
I love that.
Yeah. Anyway, we managed to we got everything sorted out, and we were able to play up with Vipik, which was obviously, as you say, a big step forward.
That was standard procedure in the 1990s.
Yeah.
I knew a guy who ran a bar in the old town, and the woman who he had to bribe lived across the street, and she used to come across the street in her dressing gown and her slippers. And it wasn't a very big bribe. It was, a few hundred crowns a month. Yeah. And so they went through this procedure. But that was standard operating procedure in the 1990s. Yeah. No, it doesn't. I didn't hear that story, but it doesn't surprise me.
So, but do you remember, obviously, Vipik, Jamesy? That was the bulk of your cricketing career, to be fair.
It was, yeah. It's when there were about 15 of us, so I could usually be sure of getting a game, because, 2 or 3 people every weekend wouldn't have time. They had to go and do something. And it was. We used to play on a plastic mat, which somebody sourced. And if you picture the kind of temporary bridge the army throws up across a river, it was perforated, like it was made of plastic, and we rolled it out.
What's it called? A flick?
It's called a flicks.
But an army bridge is made of metal, and it has holes equidistant from each other, and that's what this looked like.
Yeah.
Only it was plastic, and you rolled it out and pinned it down with tent pegs.
I just interrupt you there because, in fact, we were not, before we went up to Vipik to play, we actually played cricket. We represented, I don't know, the Czech Republic, in foreign lands. We actually played matches not in the Czech Republic because we couldn't, because we didn't have enough players, and B, there was nowhere to play. So we had to go and play games in other countries, which were Austria, Slovenia, Poland, Germany. So, and I think those were like I have the strongest memories of playing in those, and I think that was where Czech cricket was forged almost.
The bonds between us, as it were.
Yeah.
But we had some trouble in Czech cricket 2 or 3 years ago when control of Czech cricket changed hands. And I remember saying on some forum or other, well, that's how we started. Maybe we could go back to that for a while, travelling away to play cricket. And it was great fun, but I don't think anyone really took that into consideration. Maybe the times are different and people have serious jobs to do and they can't afford to go away for 4 days. Yeah. But that was my suggestion as an alternate reality Czech cricket to what's going on, is that you can, instead of playing here and squabbling between the different factions, you could go away to places like Munich and have a good time there.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an option.
Yeah, but just going back to those times, and I don't know if your memory will allow it, but what do you recall from those tours? And I mean, anyone particular stand out, or were they all kind of a?
Have you told your listeners about the great Scott Page?
No.
I think we'll come to that.
Well, he was one, apart from Tony Brennan, who got the ball rolling. He was probably a key figure in Czech cricket in the late 90s and the 2000s, because Tony Brennan was a diplomat and he had to go on to a different posting, and then somebody had to take it forward. There was a fellow called John Corness, who is the son of a Czech mother who married an Englishman, and John grew up in England, and his Czech skills were very necessary to get things going and pushing things forward. But Scott Page was an Australian who was probably the second after Tony most important figure in the early days of Czech cricket. And when we used to go away and play in different towns, somebody would be nominated to organise the accommodation and the transport. And Scott's turn came when we went to Munich, and we had two games in Munich, one against the Munich Cricket Club in the English Garden, which is a very pretty park in Munich, and then there was another game on the Sunday somewhere else, I can't remember where. And Scotty was in charge of the accommodation, and he kept it a secret. We got there on Saturday morning, we played a good game, but we were very tired. We needed to get to our hotel, and he said, come on lads, come with me, hop on the tram. It's not very far, it's 20 minutes, and we got on the tram, and we slowly chugged out of Munich, and then we came to the end of the line. We got out in the middle of the countryside. He said, we need to change trams, lads, just a few more stops. So we went further out in the countryside. And
I guess you had all your cricket equipment with you as well at the time. Yeah, I didn't go to this one.
It was dark by then, I assume.
It was dark. We stepped out in the middle of nowhere, and there was a big top circus tent, and that's what Scott's accommodation he had lined up for us.
This was like, I mean,
in the middle of the night.
With animals
around, and lots of stinky backpacking teenagers.
So it was some kind of like just basically like an open field where people could pitch their tent or roll out a sleeping bag. And
so we said, okay, Scotty, thanks. Let's get it. He said, oh no, lads, I'm going off into town. I've got alternative accommodation. But he actually didn't go to his accommodation. He went out dancing all night. He went to a disco all night. So in the morning, we actually did a moonlight flick because we didn't think it was worth paying money to be.
Did you actually know where you were?
No, we didn't. We had to get back into town, and we got into the centre of town. We didn't know where the hell we were supposed to be going, and we were looking for a place to have breakfast. We walked.
Was this pre-mobile phone?
Pre-mobile phones. We walked across a bridge, going across a river, and I happened to look over the edge of this bridge down into the river, and Scott was there on a surfboard. And it's a famous place in Central Europe where there's a backwash in the river which approximates to a surfing wave, and Scotty was there surfing, and he waved up at us and said, hello lads.
I presume he picked the location because...
Yes, but it was pure chance that I saw him on his surfboard, and I thought I was hallucinating. Anyway, we got to our game, we had a good time.
Yeah.
But after that, we didn't let Scotty organise anymore.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Scott played a remarkably important role in the development of Czech cricket. But it'd be fair to say that he was quite an unusual character. I think that would be a major understatement.
His skills are very specific and did not extend to organising accommodation.
Yeah, I also as well. He had a quite an impressive skill at generating trouble. I mean, actually the first proper cricket match that I took part in after the Smíchov Sixers game, which I think maybe you can talk about that, James, was when we went to Vienna and we played against Vienna. This would have been about 1998, and we'd arranged accommodation near to Austria's ground at Seebahn. We were staying in a guest house which had a restaurant and a bar, yeah, it was fine. I mean, we were playing a 2-day game as well, which was quite something. So we had accommodation. Scott had taken a tent with him and was actually sleeping in a tent outside at the ground. And of course, we were drinking a lot of alcohol. And I think I don't know. Do you recall this? Yeah, because then, like at some point, the gentleman who ran the place, who was an old guy, an old Austrian guy, just said, "Right, that's it. I'm closing. Time to go off to bed." So we went to bed. However, that wasn't enough for Scott, and Scott decided that he still had a taste for the beer. So we were asleep, and we were awoken by this tremendous commotion. And then this elderly Austrian gentleman was like shouting at the top of his voice, and there was Scott, who was quite obviously kale-eyed and obviously quite drunk. It was in the cellar of the place, and had decided that he was going to help himself to some of the beer without asking the owner.
He was borrowing the beer.
Borrowing the beer. I think his line was, "I was going to pay for it anyway at some point." But of course, we didn't speak much German, if at all. The owner had obviously. I mean, Austrians. You know, I think they've developed a bit since then, but Austria in the 1990s was quite a conservative place, and they didn't really take kindly to foreigners generally, let alone ones that were drunk and were trying to steal their beer.
And coming from Bohemia.
Bohemian, yeah, exactly. So that generated a tremendous static. I mean, the guy said he was going to throw us out and call the police and everything. In the end, I don't know. I think Tony Brennan's diplomatic skills were able to smooth things over sufficiently. But that as a result of that, Colin Glover, who was the captain of our team at the time, as a punishment, gave Scott the pleasure of fielding fine leg to fine leg all day. Didn't get a bowl. I think he put him at battered to 11, and he had suffice to say, he had a massive hangover as well. So that was something. Well, that was Scott, and he was a true character of the game, but also a very important person for the development of the game.
Okay, since we started with the stories, I would like to hear the Smíchov one, because that's one of the reasons we've never met together, because when I joined cricket in the late 1990s, Steve was already he wasn't playing that much anymore, and I think one of the main reasons he didn't do that. No,
that's not true. I mean, that was actually my first game was at the Smíchov thing. The reason I stopped playing cricket, because at the time the quality was pretty dreadful.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also was playing a lot of football. I was playing a reasonably high level of amateur football. So we were playing basically football every weekend. So I just didn't. I had to make a decision, and I mean, I guess with the benefit of hindsight, I kind of regret not being more involved. But it just meant that I ended up not being able to play the game as much. But Smíchov was definitely not. I mean, the reason I wasn't involved in Czech cricket wasn't anything to do with Smíchov.
Okay.
But over to you, James, if you want to tell the story. I mean, everyone tells the story differently. Yeah.
Please do.
Smíchov. Well, this was our first fundraising venture. It was at Smíchov Rugby Ground in the outskirts of Prague, in Prague. Smíchov, Prague 5, on a rugby pitch. And that was the week, and I may be embellishing things, but Steve is very modest, and he worked for the embassy doing work for the Roma community, the Gypsy community. And he'd just got an award that week for doing good stuff for the Roma community. He'd been given an award by the Queen of England for his work in racial integration.
Community development.
And it was well deserved too. He's an Irish Republican, but he still took took a decoration from the Queen of England. But anyway, there was a large Pakistani faction at this charity event to raise money for Czech cricket, who didn't take kindly to Steve.
Well, it was a knockout tournament, wasn't it? It was a knockout tournament, and I was playing for the British Embassy, and we got to the final. Yeah, and we ended up playing against the Prague Pakistani team. Yeah, that was it. So
Steve learned a lot of Pakistani language, Urdu, in his cricketing endeavours in Lancashire and around.
Actually,
Liverpool.
I learned it when I was living in Birmingham when I was playing there. When I developed quite a.
You take this story forward, and then I'll tell you.
No. I just learned a lot of expressions in Punjabi about and how to sledge. That was all.
We were playing the Pakistani team, and he took issue with the wicketkeeper. There was something going on between Steve and the wicketkeeper, and then the whole team came in, and then Steve unleashed a couple of foul Urdu expletives, and their family
Punjabi.
and friends were watching from the bleachers, from the stands, which are usually for people watching rugby matches. And all I remember is these Pakistanis coming off the bleachers and invading the field, making a beeline for Steve O'Connor. And Steve, instead of trying to calm things down, said, "Come on, then." So my point is, on the front page of the local English language paper was Liverpool man honoured by Queen for work for racial harmony integration, and on the back page on the sports page, Steve O'Connor ruined the Prague Sixers by provoking a race riot, and it all ended in tears.
Well, actually, I obviously there were a couple of minor issues there which you didn't mention. But first of all, they started abusing me. Actually, they started it. So I just gave a little bit back to them in Punjabi, which I think surprised. Well, I know it surprised them. I mean, I think that their wicketkeeper. No, it wasn't actually. It was I was bowling, and it was the non-striking batter. His jaw nearly dropped when I said this. Yeah. And then I think their batter, who was a man, a controversial character, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Controversial.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur.
He was appealing for. I kept on bowling it back of a length, and he couldn't hit me. And then he walked down the track and started asking the umpire, say these are no balls. So I told him that he should move his rather large corpus back into the crease in no uncertain terms, and that's kind of when it kicked off. Mm-hmm. Just like standard cricketing situation. But anyway, in any case, yeah, it was a bad look, I think the expression was. But I mean, that's the way it was back in those days.
Yeah. Again, the wild beginnings of the Czech cricket. So, guys, to move us forward a bit in time, I have to say, James, that I remember when I joined the Prague Cricket Club, which was the only cricket entity back then in the late 90s. Steve was already gone, and when I showed up in Vypich in front of the Dům dětí a mládeže Praha 6, that usually had like chicken exhibitions and things like that, but sometimes we also trained cricket there. It was Ian Bryan that I saw. It was the first person that I saw, but I think you must have been like second or third person that I met.
I remember the day you came,
Yeah.
Vypich is a park on the outskirts of Prague, and it is close to the battlefield of Bílá, where the Czech nobility and the Czech monarchy lost out to the Habsburgs, and it ushered in 300 years of Habsburg rule, 350 years.
So huge symbolism maybe as well.
So it's a public park on the edge of Prague, covered in dog dirt and rutted with pockmarked with mouse holes and things. It's not ideal for playing cricket. And once a year, there'll be a reenactment of the Battle of Bílá.
To be fair, it actually happens this weekend.
And nobody could remember when this thing came up. So once a year, we'd turn up to play cricket, and there'll be a full-scale medieval battle going on in the corner of the field. And people would come to this reenactment on the trams, and they wouldn't know what we're doing. So they would walk across the cricket pitch to get to the battle. And we would try and say, can you just walk around the edge of the cricket field? And they didn't know what cricket was.
Obviously, it was an utterly bizarre scene because, I mean, there were these guys, most of us were wearing whites.
Yeah, we did play in our whites.
Yeah, we played in whites.
It looked proper.
Yeah, stand in the middle of a place which, actually, the grass did get cut. I mean, I know that Tony was quite skillful at convincing whoever it was that was responsible for grass cutting to actually cut us some kind of a cricket ground, a field. but it didn't stop the locals just walking across the middle of it or letting their dogs off and this kind of thing. So this obviously was obviously a bit of a ban. And by the way, I was still around at that time.
Okay, sorry. I mean, yeah.
But I think actually maybe you just can't remember me.
Maybe
There were various things at that place. There would be once a year or once or twice a year the model aeroplane enthusiasts would have a day at Vipic. So you would be facing Steve O'Connor coming full pelt out of the sun, trying to knock your head off, and then over his shoulder would appear a Messerschmitt or a Spitfire. And then we'd turn up, and once a year there would be the exhibition of rabbits and chickens where we used to practice. And so we were so disorganized we could never remember when this happened. So either we played on through this market of chickens and rabbits, or we just said we can't play this week.
I can't really remember, but yeah, that was part of the everyday cricket life.
Fun.
James, I mean, so now we're back then in whatever it was, like 1998, 99, 2000. Obviously, quality of cricket was pretty low, facilities poor, cricket community small. So what were the good things about it? Mm-hmm. What really struck you as being, the reason why you'd want to go all the way up to Vic and be attacked by a modern
which was a
Messerschmitt?
bit of a ride.
Well, I enjoyed playing cricket first of all, and probably these days I wouldn't get a look into a proper cricket team, but I knew there was always a good chance I'd make the match every week. But it's also, I met people who I wouldn't normally come across in the normal course of life. So you had all sorts of people playing cricket, Englishmen, South Africans, Australians mostly, and one or two Indians. And you'd get lawyers who were involved in the privatization of state-run industry. So I knew the guy, our wicketkeeper was a guy who was involved in the negotiations for the privatization of Starapram Brewery. And on the other end of the scale, well, there's Tony Brennan, who was a fairly high-ranking diplomat. And on the other end of the scale, you'd have people who made a living buying second-hand cars in Germany and driving them to Czech Republic and selling them for cash. That was a good cross-section of the kind of society, expat society that existed here. And then you'd see one or two Czechs coming in, quite oddball, not oddball, but unusual Czechs, because they obviously saw something in cricket that they'd like to see. It doesn't appeal to most Czechs who don't know anything about it. So one or two Anglophiles, we had women joining for the same reason. We had two or three women who joined us and played in the first team and were good and went on to play in England.
Yeah, let's mention
South Africa.
Magda Pokludová. Yeah, she's still around.
She was a Czech diplomat.
Keep asking her to come back. Maybe one day we will see her again.
She later served in Afghanistan. She had a year or two in Afghanistan. Very interesting people.
Yeah.
So there was a very interesting cross-section. These days, it's all a bit, now that the Czech Republic is developed and it's a mature economy, we're all more or less the same kind of people, I think. We don't get so many oddballs.
I think the other thing which at the time is worth mentioning is the fact that the Czech Republic had quite restrictive visa laws, which meant that people from the subcontinent really couldn't get into this country. So that meant that the people that were playing cricket at the time were basically Brits, a few Australians, South Africans, a couple of not that many South Africans.
Not that many back then, no.
There was a Dutch guy playing, I remember that. So it was a very different sort of community to the one that we've got nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think that's something which has had a fundamental impact on how cricket is the character of Czech cricket, I would say.
Yeah, we used to tour, and every week, Tony would say, well, who wants to come to Vienna? Who wants to come to Munich? We had two or three Indian players, and they would say, yes, boss, as long as I can get a visa. Yeah. So they had a week to get a visa. And then on Friday night, they'd say, sorry, I didn't get a visa. Yeah. So we'd go to Munich or Vienna with 9 or 8 players. Yeah. So the first thing we would do when we get to Vienna or Munich was to go to the local youth hostel and say, anybody want to play cricket? And a couple of Australians say, yeah, I'll play. And we'd say, you any good? So, I'm all right, not there. And they'd always be the best player on the team.
Apart from me.
Apart from you, Stephen. Yeah. So that nowadays, with the Schengen visa, there's no problem about that. Yeah. So it was always a bit, you never knew what you were going to get when you went away to be in it. But that was part of the charm of it.
Just
Great fun touring. Great fun.
It was a tremendous amount of fun going on tour, and I have extremely happy memories of playing in Vienna, but also Ljubljana, Passau. I went to Passau, and Warsaw as well. We played in Warsaw as well, which is a really interesting place to actually to play the game.
Really? I never played there.
But I mean, fast forwarding now. I mean, this was 25 years ago, what we're talking about. So now we're in a situation where Czech cricket's got 3 leagues, one league, 3 divisions. How many clubs? About 10 clubs? 10?
Definitely.
Yeah, 10 or so.
Every year
clubs.
there are 1 or 2 more.
We've now got non-stop cricket going throughout the summer. We've got a winter league of sorts. So, I mean, you're still involved. Although I think the last game you played was probably with me down in Brno like 2 years ago, when wearing those new that new kit where the trousers kept falling down and we could see your underpants.
That you call pajamas?
Yeah, the pajamas. So obviously, I mean, you've seen that. You're still part of the Czech cricket scene. I mean,
I come to nets.
Yeah, you come to nets. I mean, how do you compare the two? Obviously, maybe the two are not. Maybe it's not comparable. But what are your impressions of Czech cricket now?
Well, the standard's much higher. But having said that, in the late 90s, we did have 3 or 4 very good players who had played at a high level.
Yeah.
And
we just didn't have enough players. That was the thing. But the way, like, I mean, Tim Duffield, he could play. Colin Glover, he was a proper cricketer.
Colin Glover played cricket for Scotland. Ian Bryan played at a high level when he was a young man, to county level, youth level, county.
So
several people like that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, with the guys from India, there are a lot of very good players.
Yeah.
Very good players. So it's very serious. I would say they're more genuine athletes now.
Yeah.
So they could probably run the 100 meters in a decent time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horses for courses. I don't think they have as much fun as we did, to be honest. But maybe they do, maybe I'm not. Now they're talking about touring a bit.
Yeah.
But the things that never change are, if you want to organise a tour, if you want anything to get anything done, you need 2 or 3 people who will put the hours in. Fortunately, these days you do have those people.
Yeah.
You have 2 or 3 guys who really put the effort in to try and make things happen.
Yeah. I mean, you're associated now with Vinohrady Cricket Club, aren't you? So
yeah. And there's a fellow called Michael Lonsborough who more or less runs that team with 2 or 3 associates who help him.
Yeah.
And as long as you have an extra group outside that inner core who will pitch in when necessary and get the pitches ready and the practice facilities ready, that's good.
Yeah.
But in 30 years ago, 25 years ago, and today, it was a bit amorphous. You know, who was ready, who you could count on to do. Then, as now, you had people on the outside line saying, "Well, hang on, who decided that we'd do this?" But if sometimes you've got to get your head down and get it done, and then worry about that. And it's the same now as it was then.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I mean, one of the bugbears that I've got about Czech cricket, and this is something which I think you have a similar opinion on, is that there's now an absolute absence of any space for friendly games. And let's be honest about it, both of us we're men of years. I mean, we're getting on, but we still love the game, and we still love to occasionally play the game. But the reality is that neither of us are good enough really to be playing in a league scenario anymore.
What bugs me now is that the young men, and I wish there were young women too, but they're not. It's mostly young guys playing cricket.
There are some.
They don't have a chance to break in as much as they did in our day, because it's taken terribly seriously. It's very short formatted, the game, and if a young boy has a bit of an iffy over, if he bowls an over and his confidence drops and he's hit all out of the ground, then that's it, he's taken off, because it's very serious and it's very short. You can't have a guy bowling rubbish for 2 or 3 overs. Yeah. So I feel
whereas you made a career out of it, didn't you?
Yeah, well, but there are 2 or 3 young guys who could benefit from longer form of the game, if not 2-day cricket, then at least 50-over cricket, who would have the chance to play themselves in or bowl themselves in, and that's what I think.
We just go back to your last game you played, and I'm not sure if it really was that game in Brno that we played in.
Well, hang on, just to bump in there. The only reason I got to play in Brno and this is another strand of conversation, is that a lot of players couldn't see themselves travelling all the way
Yeah.
to Brno,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if they can't travel to Brno to play 30 or 40 overs, they're not going to travel to Munich or Vienna,
Or Vienna. Yeah.
I guess, for a whole weekend.
Yeah. That's
So
true.
yeah, that was the last time. I had problems with my neck and back.
But did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy playing?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I did, but
did you
it
get any
was-
wickets?
I got a couple of wickets, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. Yeah, I did enjoy it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. It's still enjoyable, even that kind of cricket. But I think to sell the cricket, sell cricket to the Czech Republic, I think the old white clothing is probably preferable, because Czechs and foreigners have this romantic view of English cricket or cricket in general as something that's played in white, and it's very languorous, and you take your time, and people stop for tea.
Yeah.
And if you're dressed in purple and blue, it's not the same thing, and it's all over in 3 hours, and you don't stop for tea, for drinks.
It's an eternal point for discussion that we have mentioned here several times on the podcast as well, James. I mean, I see your point. I don't know what's the solution, but yeah. I agree. I agree with you that the red ball cricket shouldn't completely disappear, even in Czech Republic. We'll see what we can do about it.
That's my view. But we can't pick and choose at the moment, because we only have one ground.
Yeah.
I mean, we say that we have
Here in
six.
Prague, there's one ground. There's one in Brno as well.
One in
Don't forget.
Brno, but we say we have 6 or 7 or 8 teams in
Or even more.
in Prague, but there's still only one ground or 2 pitches.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like it's like saying, well, Inter Milan, FC Roma share a ground with somebody else. I mean, the Italian football teams routinely have 2 teams in a city, and they both share the same ground. That's us,
Yeah.
right? So
Except
to
there's
say,
8.
Yeah,
Except
exactly.
there's like 8 teams using the one ground.
Yeah.
okay,
It's
so
not just one
it
San
sounds
Siro.
good
Yeah.
that there's eight teams, but in reality, it's not like that.
Yeah.
So.
So I mean, just sorry.
No,
Michael,
no,
just-
go
I
for it.
think one way around that is to tour. And if people don't want to tour, then some people do want to tour. So the people who want to tour can go and tour.
Yeah,
It just
definitely.
needs-
Could Jim say this is?
It needs someone to
no.
organise, and
Yeah,
that's the big
yeah.
crux.
Yeah.
No, it's something definitely that we can work on the next season and think about. Definitely.
Well, just looking forward now, because we've touched on the past, and we've now talked about the present. But looking in the next 2 or 3 years, I mean, what do you think what would you suggest as a change that would make Czech cricket better than it is at the moment? And I mean, from a purely personal perspective, obviously, I mean, I'm not talking about like a radical restructuring of the league structure, or like constitution change or stuff like that. I mean, just from your own perspective, what do you think would be an improvement?
Well, we can all wish for things that won't necessarily happen. A third team that is a bit more casual, that has room for people like you and people like our sons or your sons, who are only 17 or 18, who want to get into the game without being scared to fail. The last time I played with you in Brno, I was shouted at because I messed up some catch or something.
Not by me.
Not by you.
Surprisingly.
You don't want to go into a cricket match feeling afraid if the ball comes anywhere near you.
Yeah.
So I would like a third team. Well, actually, it's a basic tendency of captaincy that you don't shout at someone who drops a catch anyway.
Yeah.
That's Ricky Ponting speaking. I saw him on television 3 weeks ago. He said, "What's the point of doing that?"
Yeah.
But okay,
Damage
if we
has been
can't
done.
suppress our urge to shout at people who drop catches, then have a third team where it is we still want to win, but we're not going to shout at people who
For dropping
fluff a
catches,
catch
because
or-
we'd be shouting at each other all game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that turned me off, actually, I mean, I had to stop for a couple of years because of health reasons. But I used to be on this WhatsApp group for our second team. And after a game, people would say, "Sorry about that, captain." And the captain would say, "Yeah, sorry for shouting. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't have." But, what's the point in that? I dropped a catch and somebody shouted at someone. and it just doesn't make it very much fun to play.
Yeah,
even if you're being serious,
yeah,
even at the top level.
Yeah, I think the from my perspective, and maybe this is maybe a British one, is that like in those situations, I want to be in a team where rather than shouting at each other, you just be making fun out of each other and laughing at each other.
That's the
I
most
mean that,
important part.
and then afterwards when you go for a beer, you just spend the evening making fun out of each other for how bad you played,
Yeah,
or
make him
what
wear
mistakes you
something
made.
funny, make fun of
Exactly,
him,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Because
But I think that's the essence. That's the fundamental change that's happened in Czech cricket now. Is that the game has become the players that play the game take it far more seriously. Whether it's actually in qualitative terms any better, that's a moot point. I think that's a real moot point. But it's far more serious, and I think for the likes of you and me, there's not much space for us anymore. Another challenge, of course, is where can we play? Because we've only got one place to play. So I mean,
well, there's Velvery, but
yeah.
We get back to the Smichov story here with Olvari.
no, because of the great attraction about cricket in general is that it has room for all. It has room for genuine sportsmen, and it has room for people who are a bit shy and who aren't sporty but like an intellectual challenge. And that's the great joy of it, really.
Yeah.
When I was at school, I played goalkeeper, because I was asthmatic, but I was still part of a team. So you get the sense of being part of a team where it's not strictly speaking a team game. It's a series of individual challenges and duels. And if we can attract people like that into the game, that's all to the good. But they're not going to be attracted if they're going to be
absolutely
ridiculed.
no.
So
that's a fair point.
That's what I'd like to see change, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can't. I think we're slowly getting to the end, but we cannot mention the main statistical effort of James.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that James may have a bit of a reputation of being not that good, but he does actually have, I think, maybe the best bowling figures, or some of the best bowling figures
The best bowling
have ever been posted
in the history of Czech
cricket.
cricket.
In the history of Czech cricket, yeah. I don't know. Is it true, James?
I got 6 wickets for 8 runs in 2008, and I had the scorecard to prove it.
And where was this
He's got it printed on
where was it
above
played?
his mantelpiece.
It was played at Vipik. I had a bit of help from the pitch.
I think up at Vipik, I think the average score was about like 60 or 70, wasn't it? I mean, it was definitely a bowler's track.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I'm glad we mentioned that, because I do appreciate that. And I do respect that, Jimsy. Well done. Well done. You've been a dangerous bowler at the Villa.
Yeah. And I'd like to actually just turn the spotlight onto Michal now. Michal, what was your impression of the people like James when you appeared? How old were you? You were 14, 15,
Yeah, I
16,
think we do have
that?
a special relationship with James. He's a dear friend of mine. As I said, he was one of the first persons I've met when I joined cricket. And being an young, nerdy, Anglophilic kid, I obviously liked something that most reminded me of a 19th century Britain, which was James.
Like the eccentric Englishman
but
kind of thing.
It was a bit of a game we played, Joe. It was a bit of a game James played with me. We made fun of the various historical allusions, etc., etc. And James is the person that gave me my cricket nickname, to be fair, Misha, because I was just the youngest at that time.
That was me?
It was you.
Okay.
And you knew that the version for children for Michal is Misha, and it stuck.
But he's nearly 14. He's still Misha.
Exactly. No, even our Pakistani teammate Faizan calls me Misha. Obviously, these days he only spells it wrongly, but yeah, it stuck. And so it was a pleasure. I remember David Talachko and you were kind of the main guys we always made fun during the game, and it was really good. Yeah.
No. Yeah, what else can we say, though? I mean, I think there's a value in talking to people like you and me and Steve, because we have a kind of institutional memory.
Yeah.
And some of the efforts that are being made now have already been made, and we can tell people the mistakes that were made and how you might be able to do it. We're still looking for a proper ground. People like John Corness and Tony, who's no longer with us, and Steve were involved in those efforts. We got so close, and then things fell at the final hurdle. But now and again, it's worth checking in, seeing how was it 25 years ago? Did you ever try this? And what would you do again? So although
Yeah.
we're old buffers,
Perspective is one of the things
Yeah.
I do. I keep reminding all the young players or the new cricket players, guys, perspective. We've
Yeah.
been here. These things has happened before in Czech cricket. It's a bit of a circle of life that's happening all the time. Just
but there are other
Be
countries.
patient.
There are other countries. Vienna, for example, is far ahead of us. They have a proper ground. They've had it for 25 years.
Yeah, they had a head start, to be fair.
Did they? I mean,
Yeah.
somebody. Yeah, they found a farmer who didn't want to farm his field because he got more money for not farming it from the EU.
That's pretty similar to our
Okay.
situation.
Okay, so
Only
so
later.
he let out his wheat field for 25 years to Vienna Cricket Club.
Yeah.
So somehow they got a little bit ahead of us, and now their national infrastructure is far greater than ours, far in advance.
Yeah.
And also in Hungary and in Germany, maybe. I'm not sure about
Germany, definitely. Hungary, I'd be.
So maybe we should be sending ambassadors to these countries and finding out how they do it, and then maybe we should try a different tack. Because
think-
25 years later, we really should have a proper setup. Now.
Yeah,
We don't have it.
I think for me the main lesson that I would take from being involved all those years ago, it would be that it's important to keep a bit of space within the cricket calendar for friendly games and to allow people to enjoy the recreational side of the game, because it's not just about a competitive contest. It's all cricket is more than that. It can be more than that, and we know it can be more than that because we experienced it, and it's a wonderful opportunity to spend time together. Get to know the opponents better than just literally come in. You play against them. You shake hands and then you pack up and go home. I mean,
that is definitely disappeared.
and frankly, the atmosphere in many games these days is quite adversarial. And that's certainly something which was never the case when we played. And frankly, I've seen it in the UK as well. As that, I mean, even in league matches, which are at a high level. At the end of the game, everyone goes into the clubhouse afterwards. There's real camaraderie. The players know each other. It's a much stronger sense of community, and that's something which I really miss here, and something which I think would be facilitated by more friendlies and a bigger opportunity for us to all spend time together, because that's something which it was the essence of playing cricket, and to me it still is actually.
Yes.
Well, on the other hand, our club, Vinohrady Cricket Club, in the early days, we had to rub along with people sometimes, but I can't think of a single person in Vinohrady Cricket Club who isn't a nice guy. They're all 100% nice guys. So it would be nice to see them a bit more often, either on the cricket field
and also as well, the players from the other clubs. I mean, when I come into contact with them and I chat with them on the sidelines, they all seem nice people. But the reality is that
actually, in the early days, we did see them a bit more, didn't we? From other
but
clubs.
now it's just like it's an occasional chat, and then that's it. And then you're out on the
guys,
cricket field.
back then there were 2, 3, 4 clubs the maximum. It's the evolution.
Yeah, but now it's just a case of really, just like.
I think your points are absolutely spot on. But we have to realize the cricket has grown since then. So let's maybe sometimes put more effort on these things and on the social aspect of the game. Yeah, that is something that has been missing recently, and I'm glad you say that. No, it's something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, fellas, have we
covered everything? James, you got anything more to tell us?
Tell us if you have anything to say. There's your floor, Jamesy. Do you have a message for the Czech cricket community?
The European, what is it called? Cricket League? The
European Cricket Network, I'd say.
Network is between clubs from different countries in Europe. Is that right?
Yeah, but there are nation competitions, and then the winners play each other in Spain. Once a
they
year.
have this T10 tournament.
It's like a sort of Champions League.
Yeah.
I mean,
for prize money.
There is prize money involved in the there is
I
prize money involved.
don't like amateur players playing for money.
Yeah.
Because it opens a whole can of worms.
It does. Yeah, and also the betting is something.
Betting, we shouldn't be betting on our kind of cricket.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you say that, because that's my.
I'm really against this. There are people in our club who don't agree.
Yeah.
Surprising people who don't agree. They think it promotes a absolute top level possible of cricket, but I don't like it. If they did it without prize money, that'd be fine. But I think it's bad.
Yeah, but I think any kind of cricket which is in the format T10, you can't really take it seriously. It's not a proper form of cricket. I mean,
But it hives off our limited cricket facilities for this
yeah. It also
for-profit competition. It means for a certain time of year we can't play our cricket, and that's bad.
And it leads to the degeneration of the quality of cricket as well. I mean, because you're basically bowlers are reduced to cannon fodder, and batters are just basically looking to smash the ball every single ball. And cricket can be like that, but cricket's a lot more than that, and we know it ourselves. It's a game of skill, patience, stamina, tactics. And T10 reduces it to basically something which is even less sophisticated than baseball.
Yeah, so on that matter, I think we can finish off. We pissed off a couple of people again, which is...
Did we?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we do it. I mean, yeah,
no.
we raised a couple of questions. But yeah, I agree with that, and I'm happy you said that, because I believe it's important to say what's on your mind freely. And yeah, I basically agree with you with all that you said.
But you don't have to. If you don't agree with us, it's fine. But
no, I don't have to. Yeah, but I do. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think you said it pretty spot on. So guys, that's it for this
episode. James, thanks very much thanks for joining us. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you, James. You were I hope you were one of the first veterans of Czech cricket that joined our show, and we're gonna have.
Well, there are two or three early guys who could come and talk Czech to you about
but hopefully
so maybe they could.
We'll try to convince them to come along.
Because it's important, as I said, institutional memory is important.
And I also hope that at some point in the not too distant future we'll get a chance to see you playing cricket again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah,
don't know about
have another 6 pack. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thanks very much.
And see you soon.
Bye.